Let's go ahead and jump right into prototyping. You're going to need fabric shears, pins, a pencil, and your sewing patterns. You're going to make sure that you have all the patterns necessary to create your prototype. I have already laid my pattern pieces like this. I've laid my front pattern piece on the fold, and I've gone ahead and laid out my other two pieces along the fabric like this. And you're going to also want to be very cautious of how you're laying your patterns down on the fabric. And as you can see here, I've gone ahead and measured my grain line to the selvage of the fabric and making sure that my piece is on grain. Anytime you have a cut to piece, you're going to do this method of measuring. And again, I've gone ahead and placed my center fold on the fold of the fabric. I'm going to go ahead and cut out my patterns, and you're going to go ahead and cut all of the patterns that are necessary for you to create your prototype. And the whole purpose of this is to test out your patterns and your drape to make sure that they're going to go together nicely. You're going to transfer any dart markings that you may have, such as these ones that I have here, and you're going to make sure that you transfer all notches and all other symbols and markings that are necessary in order to create the prototype for your design. Don't forget that if you have any darts, you want to make sure that you mark the apex, and you're going to also want to make sure that you make snips in the fold anywhere you have a center fold or any piece that is cut on the fold. Make sure that you go over all of the markings to make sure that you can see them. You can even use a marker or Sharpie. I just decided to stick with my pencil in this instance. And then you're going to do this until you have marked and cut all of your pattern pieces. And as you can see here, I'm cutting out my strap piece, and then I'm going to take care of my back bodice. And you really want to make sure that you're being accurate with everything in this stage, because it's not necessarily a free ticket to be sloppy. And here I am marking the wrong sides of my muslin, since muslin looks very similar on both sides and you don't want to get them mixed up. I do this for every single piece. And I'm also going to unfold my bodice and mark the center front of my bodice on the outside, or what would be the right side of the fabric, just to make sure that it's going to be nice and straight. And now I have all three of my bodice pieces, and I'm going to go ahead and take care of cutting out my skirt. And in case you missed it, I have included a photograph step-by-step guide on how I drafted my skirt, and you're going to make sure that you have all of the correct markings. Make sure you double notch your center back so that way you know where your center back seam is. And I'm going to mark the center front of my skirt like this with my pencil on what would be the right side of the fabric, again to make sure that everything is hanging properly. And now I have cut 2 of every bodice piece because my bodice is going to have a lining. And now I have my back skirt and my front skirt. And now I'm going to start with my front bodice, and I'm going to stitch all of my darts. I'm going to start by pinning them all together. And in my opinion, stitching a cutaway dart like these ones is way easier than having to deal with a regular dart with a fold. You can treat it like a regular seam and then just stitch to the vanishing point. I choose to backstitch lightly at the vanishing point because I feel like that gives off a really good finish in my instance. And then I'm going to go ahead and stay stitch my neckline, and I'm also going to stay stitch my back bodice and my shoulder straps on the edges where the neckline is, as you can see here. And then I'm going to take care of stitching my shoulder seams and my side seams, leaving my center back seam open like this. Then I'm going to take my front skirt and stay stitch the waistline from side seam to center front, repeating the same thing on the opposite side. I'm going to do the same thing for my back, and I'm going to sew my side seams together, leaving center back open. I'm going to take my bodice, my outer shell, or what would be my outer shell fabric, and I'm going to pin it to the waistline, making sure that everything matches up, and making sure that my notches at the waist match up, making sure that my side seams match up, and making sure that my center back edges are even and those match up also. For me, this is also one of those instances where the raw edges may not completely match up, but the stitch lines will. So I'm going to stitch this seam along the waist. And now I have gone ahead and inserted my invisible zipper just to test out the fit, because you do definitely want to do zippers for your muslins and prototypes. And as you can see here, I have pressed the bodice seam up towards the bodice. And this completes my zipper. And now I'm going to take my lining and do the exact same thing that I did for my outer shell fabric, or what would be my outer shell fabric. And I'm going to press under the waistline edge 1/2 inch, which is the seam allowance. I'm going to pin the necklines together, and I'm going to pin my shoulder seams together. And again, I'm pinning my lining to what would be the right side of my fabric. Then I'm going to stitch along the neckline like this. And I've gone ahead and stitched my neckline, understitched it, and then I went ahead and finished off my armholes and understitched those as best as I could. I also left the spaces open that my shoulder straps will be inserted into. And as you can see now, my lining is on the inside, and it pretty much encases all of the construction on the inside. I'm going to insert my shoulder straps into the spaces that I left open, and I'm going to secure them, and I'm going to stitch them in place with the machine. And to finish off the lining for your zipper, you're going to take your zipper and you're going to take the lining and fold it back right sides together with the zipper in between the lining and the outer fabric, and you're going to stitch along the zipper edge from the top of the bodice all the way down to the folded edge at the waistline. And then you're going to turn this inside out, and this will finish off the zipper. And as you can see here, it gives a nice clean finish, and you can see my shoulder straps have also been secured at this point, and you can see it's very neat and very professional. What's going to happen here is you're going to fold over the lining over the waistline seam, and you're going to hand stitch this. But since this is a prototype, don't be too concerned about hand sewing. I usually will just pin anything that needs to be hand stitched, and then obviously hand stitch it for the final garment. But for right now, I'm just going to pin down the edge at the major areas like I have here, and then I'm going to go ahead and fit this in the next step. And you also just want to be very cautious of the construction steps that are needed for your particular design, because your design will probably be different than mine. Here we are at the dress form. I have put my dress sample onto the form, and we're just going to look it over and make sure that everything looks good. And as you can see here, we're looking pretty solid. There's no more gaping in my neckline, and everything else seems to be looking nice and smooth and fitted. If you have any type of drag or pull lines or puckers, you want to go ahead and address these right away. As you can see here, I could technically take my dart in a little bit more, and the way you would do that is you would just pin out the excess that you need to remove like I have here, and then you'll want to make sure that you transfer that onto your paper pattern. But I think for the sole purposes of this tutorial, this isn't quite that big of a concern for me. So I'm going to go ahead and just leave it be. You know, if you want to, you can go ahead and make that adjustment if you're doing a bodice like this, if you have a lot of extra, but this isn't too bad. And as you can see here, everything is nice and smooth. And you can also go ahead and just check and make sure that that it wasn't necessarily like a pressing mistake or something like that, because if you don't press very well, then sometimes that can make your garments look a little off in the fit stage. But we're looking pretty good here, and as you can see, my side seams are looking pretty smooth. My side seam lines up with the side seam of my dress form, and as you can see here, the back of my dress is looking pretty good. As you can see here, you want to make sure that your dress isn't too tight, and also you want to make sure that your zipper can zip up all the way. So for example, if you try to shut your zipper and you have about this much left over, you want to go ahead and measure that, and that is what you are going to add onto the side seam of your bodice front and back. So you'll take whatever that measurement is and divide it by 4, because there's 4 seams or 4 edges that you're going to be splitting it up between, and then that should take care of the problem of your zipper not zipping up. And yeah, so this is what it's looking like. Let's go ahead and take a look at the skirt. The skirt is looking pretty good. I wasn't going for a full-on like circle skirt. I just wanted it to be to have some fullness, but not too much like a full circle skirt would. And as you can see here, everything looks pretty good. Everything is hanging the way I want it to. Granted, this is muslin, so it's gonna look way different in muslin than it does in final fabric. But as you can see too, my waistlines match. My side seams match perfectly. And as you can see here, my shoulder seam is hitting right about the same spot as the dress form. I could technically remove the shoulder seam and just have one continuous piece that goes into the back strap. This is what we have now, and we are ready to move on to the final stage of sewing our final garment. Stay tuned for the next installment where we will be stitching our final garment. Thanks for watching and see you next time.